Welcome to the October 2025 EminiFX Receivership Town Hall. As many of you know, my name is David Castleman, and I'm the court-appointed receiver in the EminiFX case. In this town hall, I'm going to start by talking about the claims process, and that is now concluded. All investor claims against the receivership are now fixed. That means we are not negotiating deposit and withdrawal amounts anymore. The deposit and withdrawal amounts that you see in your user portal are your final amounts. Now we're next going to talk about distributions in this town hall. We've already started the primary distribution, and by this point, most people have received their primary distribution payment. If you have an eligible claim and have you received your initial payment, there is nothing further you need to do at this time. If you have not given us your payment information, there is an important upcoming deadline of October 31st, 2025. If you have a claim eligible for distribution, October 31st is the last day to get us your payment information so we can make a primary distribution payment to you. And after that, we're going to spend some time toward the end talking about the tax situation, which we've gotten a lot of questions about. I'm going to explain both the substantive and procedural issues that we're facing. But I also want you to understand that we are fighting for the best outcome for you. We have to comply with the law, and we will. But my goal is to pay you, not the IRS. And so I'll close this town hall with some reminders of Ponzi scheme warnings. If you've been to a previous town hall, you've heard me say these before, and we'll just do it one more time at the end. But before we do all that, let's start with the conclusion of the claims process. So as you may have seen in your email, we filed our final claims report with the court. And in order to protect your privacy, only your 5-digit claim ID was used. So you can find that claim ID on the user portal and also in the claims report. That said, the user portal has all the information that is in the claim report, as well as additional information on how to receive distributions and payments. I'll talk about that, distributions, in the next section, but going forward, really the user portal is the best place for you to find information on your individual claim rather than the claims report that is for documenting everything to the court. Now, we received some questions on why your name isn't on that claims report. And that's, again, because we really are focused on user privacy. So every claim ID is on the report, but only the names of individuals are in the actual user portal that each user with that name has access to. So again, we're really trying to protect privacy and protect your data when we submit to the court, which is a public document, and that's why we only use that 5-digit anonymized ID. Now, some users did not have any verified transactions. Usually that's because of an inter-user dispute, in which case that user with no transactions does not have a claim. Those claim IDs are listed in the zero transaction section of the report that we filed, but those users do not in the end have a claim under the court-approved distribution plan. So at this point, the claims process has concluded. All deposits are fixed. All withdrawals are fixed. The claims are done. Some people have asked if they can still add transactions to the user portal, and unfortunately the answer is no. The deadline to add transactions or make changes passed over 1.5 years ago, and we are in the distribution phase of the receivership right now. So if you go to the user portal again, that's going to have the most up-to-date information about your claim. So check there first before sending a question to the folks at Strata. All right, let's now talk about what folks have asked us the most about and our primary goal right now, which is distributions. And the user portal that I just mentioned for claims is also going to be your main way for you to track distributions and update your payment information. Now, so far, we are still making the initial distribution, which we're sending out in waves, and that's 45% of what you deposited. for investors who deposited more than $100,000, and 55% if you deposit $1,000 or less. And then that payment is also going to be deducted by the withdrawals under the rising tide method. And you can see, if you go into your user portal, what that actual distribution payment to you based on your deposits and withdrawals is going to be. And we're going to update the portal to make that even clearer. But that information is on the portal right now. And it is 55% for the users who deposited less than $1,000 or less, because they only get one payment. So if you remember, for the smaller payments, and this is largely to avoid very, very small payments down the line, but those folks get a higher initial payment, but not future payments. And the folks who put in $1,000 or more get 45% now in this initial distribution, but are eligible for an increase in the future if I'm able to increase the rising tide, which I hope I will be. So we started distributions in February of this year. Most people received those initial distributions in March. I think almost 20,000 people received distributions right away. So this process has been moving for months already. We're going to continue to make we continue to make several waves of payments as we resolve remaining claims and as we users provided payment information, and we're going to make one more wave, and that's what I'm going to talk about with this October 31st deadline. But we do need to conclude this first distribution, given that we've already been going for several months now. We're doing well as a receivership. At the end of last month, we've paid $91.8 million to over 23,000 claimants. That's out of about $101 million budgeted. So most of the money that's going to payment to claimants in this round, most of those payments have already been paid, and users have that money in their bank accounts. We've initiated another $1.5 million to over 700 claimants, and we'll keep doing so throughout the end of the year as you get us your payment information, and as I discuss one more additional way we're going to try to get money to users in a moment. 22,000 is a big number, but there's still thousands of claimants who are eligible to receive a payment who have not provided their payment information, and we want you to do so. I want to emphasize, my goal is to pay every single claimant in this case. So we've got the money budgeted, we have the ability to pay you, and we have paid most people. So if you give us that information, we're going to make that payment to you. So if you haven't given us the information, that's the deadline that I mentioned. I'll say it again, October 31st, 2025. You have to have your payment information in the portal by that date. If we don't have your payment information by October 31st, we may not be able to pay you in this round, even though we have the money set aside. So you really got to get us that information. We are going to try one more thing starting in November, and that's if we don't have payment information for a user, but we do have a last known US address, again, that has to be in the United States, and a last known US address on file, then we're going to try to send those folks a check. If that check cannot be delivered, if that check isn't cashed, and we don't have a US address on file, then you won't get a payment in this initial round. So again, I've said it throughout this presentation, I'll say it just one more time, please go to the user portal, get us your payment information. There's a tool on there, you can get a check, we can pay you electronically, we've done both. But we really need you to go on to the user portal if you haven't done so, to give us that information so we can get you your payment. And if you don't, we're not going to end your claim. You're still going to have your claim, but you're going to have to wait until the next distribution, and that may not be until 2027, 2028. I don't have a date for that yet because of the uncertainty around the tax situation that we'll discuss. But it will not be, almost certainly not be in 2020, early 2026. It's going to be something that's in the future. So that's why I really want people to get their information now, because it's not like, oh, if you don't do it in October, we'll pay in February of 2026. You could be waiting years for a payment if you can't meet this last deadline after we've been going for several months now. On that topic, we've been asked how much the next distribution is going to be, and I wish I had an answer. It's going to be as much as possible. I know it's not very specific, but we're holding on to money because of the tax situation, and again, I'll get into the details on that a little bit later in this presentation. But right now it's 45% for over $50,000 in deposits. That's class 3, 55% for under $1,000. I don't anticipate ever increasing the 55%, the 45%. We'll increase it as soon as I can. And I'll announce a new percentage when I'm able to do so in the future. The way we'll announce it is we'll put it on the website, we'll send out an email, we'll put it in the user portal. So it's important to really keep, you can keep monitoring the website, but the most important thing is to keep the email address that you have with us. Keep using that email address, monitor that email. If you want to change your email, that's fine. We have the ability to change and update your email. So if you do change your email address, I would just ask that you go on the user portal and update it there as well. And when we do a second payment, and I'm confident that we're going to try to do that, and I'm hopeful that we will be able to do that. But if we, at that point, you'll be able to update your payment information in the user portal. So that's why it's really important to keep access to the user portal as well. I'm going to answer some additional questions we received on distributions. First, some people are wondering why they didn't receive a payment even though they had more deposits than withdrawals. And that's because of the rising tide, as we've explained. But what that means is that those users have received more withdrawals from the same pool of funds they were using to make payments pre-receivership than equivalent claimants are receiving in this distribution. So they've already gotten more, and the claimants who are paying are getting in this initial distribution, and that's why they're not getting more at this time. Now, it's important to note, some investors who are not eligible in the first round might receive a payment in the second round, depending on the amount of withdrawals. So if this situation applies to you, please keep monitoring your email. Second, some people have asked why they cannot get money back that was listed on their account balance at the time of the receivership. Now, as I've explained in some prior town halls, all the money that was actually deposited into EminiFX was put into one giant pool of funds, and there were no trading profits. Because the funds that were recovered were less than the total that you all collectively put into EminiFX, we are only able to refund a portion of the amount deposited. All right, so moving on now to the second half of this presentation, we're going to talk about the user portal first, and then I'm going to get into the meat on taxes. We're going to have this October 31st deadline. You need to get your payment information by then, if you haven't already done so, and then we're going to take the portal offline for a couple weeks. We're going to do that so we can process all the payment information we received, and we're also going to update the top section. It's going to redesign how you can see your claim and your distribution status. Hopefully that's back online sometime mid to late November. And that will also answer another question of what documentation you get for tax and accounting purposes. So that top section will have the information on your claim, on your distribution. It's already there now on the portal, but I think this will make it a bit easier for people to have that information, especially because, as I'm going to explain, we cannot give tax advice. And so we've received that question a lot, which is, well, what is are the distributions taxable? And because we can't give tax advice, I can't really answer that. But what I can say is we're only returning a portion of the principal received. And so there were no profits on any of the money that you put into EminiFX because there were no profits at all. But you can see on your claim and distribution section in the portal what your initial claim was, what you put in, and that you received only a portion back, and you can use that for any tax or accounting purposes that you might have. So moving on now to a big question we've received from a number of users, and that's about the tax situation of the receivership itself. And so the question that we're generally getting is, why reserving for taxes if EminiFX never had any profitable trades? It's a great question, and I'm going to take some time to answer it both here and also in my status report to the court that I'll file in a couple weeks. So, to kind of dive deeply into this topic here. As many of you have experienced, under the US system, the taxpayer determines how much they owe, files a return, and waits to see if the IRS will challenge them. For the pre- and post-receivership period, we filed the taxes as required, and we determined, based on our positions, that we owed about $36,000 in taxes, which compared to the size of the receivership of $250 million deposited is not very much. We paid those $36,000 in amounts. What we're holding is about $40 million in reserve in case the IRS challenges the filings that we've already made. So again, to be clear, I do not think we owe the IRS that money. I think that money should go to you. But under federal law, at least right now, we have to have enough money to be prepared for the worst case scenario, just in case. Now you might be asking, how could there be taxes if there were no trading profits? And the answer is there's two big picture problems that we have, and I'm going to describe each one in turn. So the first problem is that because of the way Eddie Alexander formed EminiFX, all the investor contributions are essentially revenue. And revenue generally counts toward income, which is generally taxable. And so taxable income, generally, is calculated by deducting the amount from the amount, starting with the revenue and then deducting costs and other deductions that you might have. And so what our position is that the revenue for investor contributions is offset by withdrawals, by expenses, by the transfer of assets that occurred when the receivership was created, and most importantly, that the revenue is also offset by the decline in the value of the Bitcoin held by EminiFX in 2022. And that's about $40 million in paper losses. So if you take all of that together, our position is that the various offsets zero out the tax liability for the period before the receivership. But if the IRS takes a different position, there could be a substantial liability for what is sometimes called phantom income, and part of our reserves is to pay that tax liability if we actually end up owing it. That's the first problem. There's another one, and the second problem has to do with the way that regulations for entities like the receivership are written. And the receivership files something called a qualified settlement fund. That's a very technical term under the IRS. It ends up being, once you kind of cut through all the technicalities, the basic question is going to be, when did the receivership receive the Bitcoin that was in the coin payments account? Was it when the receivership was formed in May of 2022? Or was it when the receivership gained access to that Bitcoin account in November 2022, even though we already owned it? And that difference is about $50 million. So our position, as reflected in our 2023 return, is that the right date is May 2022, under the way the regulations are written and under the whole purpose and structure of the tax code. We think that's correct. That's what we've argued. And that results in a much, much lower tax liability for the receivership. But if the IRS takes a different position on those regulations, there could be a substantial liability for what would turn from a taxable gain, from a taxable loss to a taxable gain on the sale of Bitcoin. So again, we think we're correct. We think we've taken the correct position, but we need to reserve and hold back money for the possibility that the IRS takes a different position. But through all that, I do want to emphasize that we are fighting for the lowest possible tax because that's what we think is appropriate under the law and under the facts of this case. Now, procedurally, a major problem, this is on top of the substantive issues, so those are the substantive problems, but there's also a procedural problem, and that means that a federal equity receiver doesn't have the power under current law to require the IRS to decide the various tax returns quickly. It can take years to get to finality. And it's such a widely recognized problem that affects so many receiverships that a Republican and a Democrat recently introduced a bill in Congress to try to fix this problem and essentially force the IRS to decide these returns very quickly and the issues in these returns very quickly. So I'm actually personally in touch with the folks who are promoting this bill, really to make sure they understand the impact that this problem has on claimants, on real-world claimants like yourselves. We're going to continue to monitor the progress of the bill, and if it passes and we can take advantage of it, we're going to act appropriately in consultation with our tax advisors. And we will keep you posted if there are any major developments on our website in that area. Okay, so what's next in the receivership? Now that we're done with the claims process, most people have their distributions. We're getting toward the end of the first round of distributions, which will be the biggest round. What's next? The tax situation will eventually be resolved. We can't say when because of the issues we've just gone over, but assuming our substantive positions end up holding, at least in part, we will have additional funds to distribute. We're going to hold those funds in reserve conservatively in the meantime. We're going to put them in. We've got them in FDIC insured accounts, which is what we've been doing so far, and that's where they're going to stay. A few other smaller items there remain. We have 2 separate litigations that I filed in state court against third parties. We're going to continue to litigate those cases, and if there's a recovery, the amounts recovered will go toward future distributions as well. So the money that comes into the receivership in that case will go and get paid to claimants. In the underlying case, and this is I'm a receiver in a CFTC versus Alexander and EminiFX case. There's a litigation. That's the case that Judge Caproni is overseeing. So in that case, the court issued a summary judgment against Mr. Alexander and EminiFX. That's really, in the end, between the CFTC and Mr. Alexander, but it does mean that the entire case is essentially ripe for appeal right now. Mr. Alexander has filed a notice of appeal with the Second Circuit. We don't know yet what issues he intends to press in his appeal. To the extent that appeal relates to receivership issues, to the extent it relates to the planned distribution, we will participate to the extent it is appropriate to do so. But the appeal process can take quite a bit of time to resolve as well. We received a question from a user about our motion on the very expensive watches purchased by Mr. Alexandra and the EminiFX funds, using EminiFX funds, and also the access to his laptop. We recently filed a motion on this topic. A court also issued a ruling on a prior motion that we had filed on this topic. All of our motions and the court's rulings, including Mr. Alexander's opposition to our filings, it's all on the docket, and the entire docket is on our website at EminiFXReceivership.com. And so if you go to that website, go to the very top, you'll see a civil docket, and you can see a link up there. All the court filings are on that page. They're all free of charge. You can download them all, you can read them all. But because there's ongoing litigation on this topic, that's really all I can say. I can't offer more comment than that, but again, whatever we have said quite a bit publicly on the docket, and all that's on our website, so you can go there if you'd like more information. I'm going to wrap up now. One issue we've talked about before, I often close with this, but I'm going to emphasize it again, now that distributions have really gone out to most people anyway, is about fraud detection for your investments. Some investors have sent in questions, frustrated that they're only getting 45% back right now, and I understand that frustration. In some Ponzi schemes, the recovery is even less, quite a bit less than that. I think it's important at this stage, and really at every point, to remember the warning signs for investing in Ponzi schemes. And so even though the government is shut down, there's a website they maintain called investor.gov that's still working. And that's the SEC's website that provides educational outreach to individual investors. I'll drop a link in the notes below. The entire site really is a great resource. I encourage all investors to make use of it. Again, it's provided by the SEC free of charge. They have a special page on Ponzi schemes, and I'll link to that specific page as well, and on the red flags. But I'm just going to read through them now, the headlines, and you can see the whole page on the website, again, in the link below. So here are the red flags. First, high returns with little or no risk. Second, overly consistent returns. Third, unregistered investments. Fourth, unlicensed sellers, and that can include friends and family. Fifth, secretive, complex strategies. Sixth, issues with paperwork. And seventh, difficulty receiving payments. So you don't need all 7. Any one can be a red flag. I'm not saying anyone that has any one of these is not necessarily a Ponzi scheme. That's not what we're saying. But these are the red flags. These are the things to look for. And more red flags equals more danger. And so that's why the SEC has that website. There's more detail on the website. I encourage you to go there. But honestly, just keep in mind the simple maxim: if it looks too good to be true, it probably is. And so with that, it's all the time we have for now. Please remember the October 31st deadline if you haven't given us payment information. Now, if you have deposited more than $1,000 and you've already been paid your first distribution, please just keep monitoring your email and keep access to that user portal. We'll keep trying to get you as much money back to you as we can. And thank you, and have a good evening.